Right, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our first Second Acts event. I'm excited. I think it's going to be a really exciting conversation. I have no doubt that everybody is going to be just overwhelmed, encouraged, inspired, and yeah, I chose you very carefully, Tracey, for being first because I just love your story. I love the change that you bring. And so, for those of you who don't know me but know Tracey and are here, I'm Linda Smith. I'm the CEO of 50plus-skills, and we have lots of online events for our members, but every now and then we create a series that we open up to everybody. So, this is one of those. So, Tracey, let's get going with you first, and asking about your first 25 years of life. Let's take you back to, if it's an 100-year life, the first 25 is your first quarter. So tell us a little about who was Tracey at that point in her life.
Great. Hi, good afternoon, everybody. Lovely to see you all on the call. Some faces I know, so thank you. Thank you for being the fan club. Somebody had to show up today. So thank you to the fans and thank you to Linda for the opportunity. Yeah, so I 25 years of my first 25 years, I had a very, very joyful childhood in Hout Bay, in Cape Town. And that was when Hout Bay, you still almost needed an ox wagon to get to Hout Bay. It was almost exclusively farmland, and then the sort of harbor community with the fishing. Most of the roads were gravel roads, and most of my parents' friends thought they were absolutely mad to buy a property there. There were no schools, etc. But it was very joyful because it was filled with lots of families who were all, this was their first home. It was affordable. And so in our road, we grew up, I think, with more children than adults, supervising, more dogs, and just a whole lot of craziness. And actually started many of my first businesses in Hape. So my best friend and I met her the day I was born. She's 2 years older than me. And we were the entrepreneurs in the neighborhood. So we would sell anything to anybody, whether it was picking up snails or washing cars or starting chicken businesses. We were the organizers. I went to Crinendale Junior School, which was in Hout Bay. And then there were no high schools, and there's still no high schools, sadly, in Hout Bay. So I went to Wynberg Girls, and had a wonderful schooling. I ended up as head prefect, surprisingly at the time, but was really the start of my leadership journey. Absolutely. I look back and think, how did they let me do the things that I did? I just brought lots of new ideas, and we had a wonderful headmistress who just said yes, and I sort of had the freedom to create, and it really built my leadership skills. And then I went to university. I went to Stellenbosch University, and the reason I went to Stellenbosch University is my mother wouldn't let me go to UCT because she thought I might get locked up, toying in the streets. So I always had an activist streak in me, really questioning why things were why they were. Didn't really understand them, but my mother knew that I would possibly get involved, so she hid me in Stellenbosch. and in those days I had to do my degree in Afrikaans, and I couldn't particularly speak Afrikaans pretty well. So I faked it till I made it, and I studied a business degree, but I actually realized later on, because I did the conversion course, I eventually decided to go the CA stream and had to go to UCT to basically convert a basic BCom to a CA stream. And it was in my first year of that conversion that I realized I actually didn't understand most of what I studied. So I then relearned it all at UCT, but I had a lot of fun at Stellenbosch. Met my husband, who we've been married now for 32 years. And then the latter part of my first 25 years, then moved overseas, like many chartered accountants did. We got on the first ship as soon as we were qualified, and we went to London, where we essentially, I say, became spreadsheet jockeys. It wasn't about the job, it was about the money, and the money enabled the travel and the adventures. And so we traveled quite extensively in those 2 years.
Great, wonderful. Yeah, those are fabulous journey with such interesting pointers. And it's always wonderful. I love looking back in people's stories because the markers are there, and we can, when we're struggling later on, really look back and find those things that can help us to dream again. So let's get into the second half, your first part of your professional life after London. What did that look like?
Yeah, so came back. I think we were, it was 1995, and had even in my spreadsheet jockey years, um, uh, had gone into jobs that they needed a quick fix. We were paid by the hour, a quick 6-week job. I seemed to get my job, the jobs I seemed to get were companies in a mess. And so essentially what I ended up doing was fixing systems and processes. And I think that's what a CA degree actually prepares you really well with for systems and processes. So I joined a company called Plessy Telemat, which is a big telecoms company. And I started doing SAP implementations. Most people had not even heard about SAP or SAP. I hadn't heard about it. And I joined a very, very messy project, a project in complete turmoil. It was a disaster. And then I ended up joining the consulting firm that was implementing, which was PricewaterhouseCoopers. And then moved within PricewaterhouseCoopers from SAP implementations to doing some more work in supply chain efficiency work. I then had my first child, and it was hilarious. I went to my boss and I said, "So great, I'm pregnant and I'm coming back half day." I didn't ask for permission. I'm coming back half day. And he said, "Fantastic. That's great. No problem." I thought, wow. And what he knew is that employing a woman on a half day salary was the best investment ever. Never ever worked a half day, but earned a half day salary and kind of got to the first end of that. My son was 1, and just realized I couldn't be a great mother and a consultant. The two really didn't go together. So that was my first jump. I kind of jumped off that trajectory, and my old auditing firm was in a crisis in their company secretarial department of all places, and said, "Hey, we know you're looking for some interim. Come and fix our company secretarial department," which I did for a year. Then had my daughter. And then an old colleague at PwC said, "I have found the perfect half-day job for you." So that's been always the theme. Can I find balance? And the question is, we once asked this at our book club, can you have it all? And the answer is yes, just not all at once. And so I was constantly seeking out this balance in my career, and he promised me a half-day job. He had joined Woolworths in their supply chain division. And very grateful to him. He kind of got me into the Woolies stable, and in a half-day position. It was a true half-day position, but I made it into a full-day position within about 2 or 3 months. And then began a 9-year journey within Woolworths. So I moved from supply chain into heading finances for the food division. And then eventually they put me back in my box because I'm not really an accountant. I love business. And I became head of finance for Woolworths, so responsible for the finances for I think they had about 9 divisions at the time. Incredible position, beautiful helicopter view of an incredible organization. Absolutely loved my job, but I was completely addicted to it. And it was all work and no family. And I realized about the age of 37, 38, that my children were not being raised by me. They were being raised by 2 beautiful people, an au pair and my beautiful nanny. But I was missing out, and that's not the actual plan that I had for my life. And so, yeah, that was really the point that I had my midlife crisis at 39. And that was the point that I chose to jump off the corporate ladder, which then opened up the next chapter for me.
So that ladder that was leaning against that wall happened quite early for you, actually, compared to some that were closer to 50. If we compare and I suppose the ladder has different reasons of success to significance. That's what they often talk about. And for those of us in careers later in life, I think they're lessons, even though you did it earlier, that help us to think through when we're at that crossroads, what does that look like? And so explain what was going on in your head and what motivated. I mean, I know what motivated you because it was being a mother and trying to be there more fully, but deep down there was something else as well. So share that with us.
Yes, absolutely. I think, if I look back to my childhood, coming back to the sort of segregation of apartheid, and in Hout Bay, you had the harbour, the coloured community in the harbour. And I did drama, and the drama classes were in the harbour, in the community hall. It was a wonderful drama teacher. And that was my only chance to cross over the line, really. I mean, I know many of you all grew up in apartheid. And I had this like, huh? Like, what is this? And you say to my mom, can Chantel come home with me? We really got on well at drama. And my mom would say, no, she can't. But I didn't really understand it. And I can't tell you what it was, but if I look back, it's those kind of things that there's something not quite right here, but I couldn't really put my finger on it. And if you try to raise it, and this is why my mom says I was an activist, if you try to raise it at the dining room table, it was kind of, squashed. My grandmother was a member of the Black Sash, and my father thought she was nuts. So I think there was something in me. So there was this thing that certainly I felt like I needed to do something in South Africa that built this country. It was like an inside yearning thing. It wasn't in my head. It was like a calling. And I think at 38, 39, I was asking, what is the meaning of my life? And when you're in retail, everything is about shareholder growth, no matter what. Whether the bottom is falling out of the market, we're going to grow by 15% per annum because you all want your pensions to grow. And that is what has to happen. And it's kind of relentless. And am I here just to drive shareholder growth day after day, whether it's practical or not impractical? I felt like I had something bigger that I needed to do, something more impactful. I think retail can do harm too. And I think I was like, and some of the choices I was having to make in finance were life-changing choices for other people. In business, you have to be ruthless. If we need to grow by 15%, we're growing by 15%. If that means we need to cut 1,000 jobs, well, as finance, you take the red pen out and you cut those 1,000 jobs, and you don't get emotional about it. And that just, I think there was a dissonance in me that sort of compelled me to essentially jump off the ladder without a parachute.
Yeah, I'm afraid that sometimes we can't help ourselves. There is no choice. And when it gets to that point, I think I did it 3 or 4 times across the journey from 20 to 60. So yeah, I understand that. So in this early time when you left, there were some challenges. So tell us a little bit about what you did, who you met, and what was this career transition.
Yeah. Maybe I should just mention before that what got me to jump off the corporate ladder is actually went to see I was putting on a lot of weight. So I put on about 30 kilos in my 30s. It's only a couple of kilos a year, but it adds up, and my health was starting to be impacted and quality of life. And so I was referred to a medical doctor by the name of Dr. Simon Weitzman. And I didn't know anything about him, but a dietitian said, you need to go and see Dr. Simon Weitzman. And I walked into his office thinking I was there to see a medical doctor. He is a trained medical doctor, but he'd given up administering medication for stress-related illnesses because he could see the underlying cause. And so he'd actually specialized in mindfulness and meditation. And he was my lifeline, really. He got me to slow down and to be reflective, and actually got me to actually understand what was going on inside by just paying attention. Paying attention. And then one day I just walked into his rooms. I spent 2 years with him, and I said, I'm going to leave all this. And he said, I know, I know, I know. He just allowed me to get to that point. So I think having somebody to process it with, and forcing you to slow down and listen to what your body's often telling you, not necessarily what your brain's telling you, but what your body's telling you, and listen to that inner thing, was a great gift for me. It wasn't an easy process because I'm so used to fixing and doing and having a plan that, like, jumping off without a parachute is very not in character for me. I think what was, when I knew. So I think he helped me when I knew, and I trusted my intuition. I acted with my heart and not my head, and came up with a plan later rather than had to have the plan. Otherwise, I would never have jumped. I've also got an incredibly supportive husband. So I hadn't really involved my husband in the process of my journey with Simon, because I didn't know what to say. Like, I didn't also want to unsettle him, as in, like, was I having a nervous breakdown here? I just kind of needed to go through my own process and figure out what was really going on. And it was really only at the end that I said to him, I need to do this. And without question, he said, if you need to do this, then you need to do this. It was more than half of our income. And I probably wouldn't have done it if he hadn't given me permission, that we are a partnership, but if this is the right thing for me to do, then we must trust that process and we'll figure it out. So I think having a supportive partner for me has been incredibly helpful, and critical. I then gave myself 1 year, 12 months, where I wasn't allowed to do any paid work. And that was also very critical, because I think you're going to go back in a transition. You're going to feel very unsettled. Part of me doing the work with Simon was, who was I if I wasn't this title? Like, I was so scared of being bored as well. I knew I didn't want to be a full-time mom, having tea parties. I knew I wanted to be productive and doing something that I felt was adding value to the world. So, but I didn't have a clue what that was. It was going to be so different. And I knew that if I didn't give myself this 12 months, that I would just fall back into the next person who knocked on my door and said, hey, I see that you're not working, come and do this job. And that was a really great gift, basically a sabbatical. I did lots of work. I did lots of volunteer work and essentially broadened my networks. So I volunteered at CB University in Cape Town, amazing group of women who were doing who are still doing incredible work, very deep work with students. Loved every minute of that. Came home, kind of skipping on clouds, thinking this is amazing. Not worrying about the salary, but actually just letting the work take me. And that was really the catalyst for creating TCB. Like, if this is what this kind of work can be and how meaningful it can be, how can I do this kind of work? Yeah, so that was really a lot of the sparks, a lot of the networks I made in that year, are people that ended up working for our organization or telling people about what we do. It was kind of the ripple effect, and very, very pivotal in me getting to where I got to eventually.
Thank you. Thank you for that piece that we nearly lost out on because I jumped too far forward in my questions. But you mentioned a whole bunch of things there. Identity. So often we are our title rather than who we are. And giving yourself the space to experiment with a whole bunch of things that could help you to open your mind. It's really an important part in this crossroads period, or trying to discover what would be best for you next, rather than, because so many people I've discovered leave and then they get phone calls from people who've heard you've left asking you, And then all you're going to do is go back on the hamster wheel. And so it's hard to say no, but it for the longer journey is one of the best things that you do. And the third thing you said was growing your network. Our networks are one of our biggest intangible assets that we take with us wherever we go. And they open doors. And I think the older we get, we don't really want to do any cold calling anymore. But warm networks open such amazing doors for all of us. So now we can get to the question of your coffee meeting with Tracey Gilmore.
Yeah, so I was interestingly in this, Tracey Gilmore and I have been friends through mutual friends for a very, very long time. So we would gather at a social gathering, and her and I would just end up connecting, but just talking generally. And interestingly, the universe conspires to bring you together. While I was working at SEBA University, so was she, unbeknown to me. And she was running a program called Dress for Success, which was to really help the students to get great outfits to go to interviews. And she was doing some styling workshops. It was based on an American model. And she was getting clothing like she couldn't believe from all her friends and family. She had a garage full of clothing. So she had more clothing than people she could help. And then when she started to work outside of SEBA University, she found that the gap between wanting to work and the actual available work out there, so these women were all dressed up with nowhere to go. And so whilst we bumped into each other at SEBA, and she said, "Oh, I heard you've worked for Woolies. I've been wanting to have coffee with you for years, but I knew you were too busy, and now you don't have an excuse. So I'm buying you a cup of coffee, and you need to come." And so I was actually driving in my car on the way there. And again, the universe sends you signs all the time if you're awakened to them. There was a program on the radio talking about the food bank, which is now called Food Forward, but is essentially excess food and redistributing that. And I knew from my Woolies days that Woolies was very much part of that, because there's a lot of excess food within the Woolies supply chain. So that was like a subtle message. So we had coffee in Westlake. I'll never forget exactly where it was. And, essentially Tracey came with an idea. And because I've grown up in big business, I've also got maximizer in my strength profile. So I'm not going to do anything small. Like if we're going to do something, let's make sure that it's really big. So we took the nucleus of Tracey's idea and kind of turned it upside down and said, right, this is what I think we need to do. And it was inspired for me by my nanny who raised my children. She became a widow at 50 with 5 children. And she'd never been a nanny before. She was a full-time mother in the Transkei. And she had to come to Cape Town to provide for her children. So she moved them all down. And Beauty is a hustler of note. Beauty can sell ice to Eskimos. And so she used to sell my secondhand clothes, and her and I used to celebrate on a Monday based on how much money she made. And it was great to just watch her, hustle. And then my Woolworths career, knowing that within the retail supply chain, there is as much excess food, there's as much excess clothing, especially with fast fashion. And we didn't have a solution for that. We had the food bank for the food, but we actually didn't have a solution for clothing. And so it was kind of putting these two ideas together over that kind of coffee. And, how do we use clothing in a productive way to help unemployed mothers? That was the founding seed of the idea. We then got so excited about it and said 2 things. We need premises if we're going to start this. Okay, Tracey, you go and find premises, and I'll go and talk to Simon Sisman, the CEO of Woolworths. And we did both of those things. There was no business plan. There was no presentation. Tracey is a dog with a bone. She'll phone anybody. So she got hold of somebody at the City of Cape Town. They said, yes, I think we might have something. It ended up being a triple garage in the back of an orphanage piled with junk. And I went and knocked on Simon Susman's door, and he said yes. And then we were in trouble because now we had to do something. So the sort of power of the yes, if you're on the other end of somebody with a great idea, but saying yes gives them more energy to keep pursuing this idea. And so we ended up with our triple garage in the back of an orphanage in Pickwick Street in Woodstock. It was disgusting. The woman who ran the orphanage was really lovely, but she wasn't going to be cleaning out the garages. She was going to move some stuff aside for us, and then we could work there, but then we had to clean it up during the day because the cars were going to be parked in here in the middle of the night, in the night. So there was no toilets, there was no kitchen. We had to go into the orphanage for the toilet and the kitchen. And I normally need things to be nice and neat but I don't know, we were just so like swept up in the idea that we just said, cool, we'll make it work. We sat on boxes, we had borrowed computers. And then when that first box of product arrived from Woolies, it was like Christmas. I promise you, we were like so excited. Oh, what's in this box? We'd recruited 10 women, and that I think was a genius move again. You look back and you think, how did you know to do that? I think we were driven by instinct at that stage, and we were so driven by adrenaline and all these things. We wanted to work with women who were wanting to change their own lives, and so we decided to go to an organization called the Volunteer Center, which was based in Claremont. And the Volunteer Center was exactly that. If anybody wanted to volunteer, they would find placements. And we held a focus group there. I didn't even know that we were doing a focus group, and we said, this is our idea. Would any of you be interested in pursuing that? And 10 women put up their hands. So these were women who had nothing. They were all mothers. They had nothing. And yet they were prepared to volunteer their time. And for me, that was the genius move. We had already found people with inner volition. And so they were our founding group, and they taught us so much about how to work with people, the complexity of that. And that's another whole chapter, figuring out actually what we were doing, because it was so much more than just bringing in clothing and helping women start businesses. So those were the sort of early years post the coffee. My mother, who Pam is in the retirement village with, was on the tills. She used to come up and ring up people on the tills, and we had lots of fun. We were playing shop, and we were making it up. We had no idea what we were doing, but we were having fun, and we were making it up. Every day was a new day.
Fast forward 15 years and tell us in essence what it looks like today.
Yeah, so today we have all of the major retailers as partners. We have 17 retailers, all the majors. There's almost one that I can't think of one that isn't a partner now. The beautiful thing about retail is that people leave they leave, but they leave in the retail sector. So by the time I knew probably an executive at Edcon, I knew an executive at Pick and Pay, I knew an executive at Fashini. So you could find your way into those organizations, so the power of networks. They donate about 2 million items a year to us, worth over 150 million Rand a year. So we were able to get scale by getting all those retail partners on board. We now have 4 branches around the country, and we are supporting in 5 different programs. Well, in 4 of them, we're supporting about 1,200 business owners at any given time. It's a 2-year program, but we have thousands of graduates who we also continue to support with product. And we now have 5 different programs. So our first program, which was called the Clothing Bank, get the reference to the food bank. The Clothing Bank is... we rebranded. We were called the Clothing Bank, and we rebranded about 2 years ago to Taking Care of Business, because the Clothing Bank, we are so much more than the Clothing Bank now, but it is still our founding project. So it is now called Resell, and it's exactly the same program, but it's evolved over the years. What we do with the women and how we go on the journey with them has evolved, and that is really because of what we've learned. It really takes we realized we needed to do so much more healing work, so much more building of self-confidence and self-esteem. And so our program just got deeper and deeper and deeper as we learned those lessons. We then expanded into a program called Repair, where we started to get product from Clicks. Whenever you return your hairdryer or your toaster, it now comes to me. So anything non-clothing is our repair program, and we add the technical skills to repair goods, and we have about 250, mostly men, in that program. We now have a program called Remake, where we work with retailers and manufacturers. So this jacket, they bring in thousands and thousands of rolls of fabric. They import it because we don't have any mills left in this country. And then they start making this jacket and it doesn't sell, or the fabric doesn't actually wear well. That becomes waste. They're not going to make this jacket again next year. They don't know what to do with it. So we get donations of fabric. Just a couple of months ago, we got 80,000 meters of fabric from the Fashini group. And we get trims, we get anything and everything that they can't use within the manufacturing, offcuts, samples. And then we bring women who have got some interest in sewing, have some very basic sewing skills, and we help them start a micro manufacturing business with the product as the starting point. We also secure contracts from big corporate, and they then manufacture in their small businesses to those contracts. We've put everything that we've developed, because we've developed all of our own training content mostly, because we just couldn't find the right content. I think this is one of my biggest learnings, is finding training content that really changes lives. There's so much superficial stuff out there. I always say, in my 30 years, I've probably been on, I don't know, 100 different courses. How many have you actually applied in your life? It's probably 5. And we were looking for those 5, and we ended up actually creating everything ourselves. So we have, if I exclude Grow, we've got at least 70 different courses that we've designed, and we now put that in a training company, and we offer that to other nonprofits as well as corporates. We train in corporates as well to try and spread our impact in different ways. And then my little baby is called Grow ECD, where we work with women who've started daycare centers. If you went into one of these centers, you wouldn't see much education happening. And we help her transform that daycare center into a 5-star early learning center that she can run as a financially viable business. And we basically developed the playbook as well as all the tools that she needs to do that. So we've got about 260 ECD centers that are part of that program. It's a 3-year support program, and they're educating about 12,000 learners a day in that program. But we also have an app that we developed to help her, and then we then open source that app, and we have about 6,000 ECD owners who are using that app, that have loaded about 95,000 learners. So that's kind of how it has evolved over the last 15 years.
Wonderful, Tracey. Yeah, I mean, we can go on and on and on. There is just so much. That's why the story is so fantastic. Is there a specific thing that you're proud of, or a project or an award that you want to share with us? I know there are many.
I think, we in 2016, I think it was, we were nominated for what is called the Schwab Award. And this is the founders of the World Economic Forum, Klaus and Hilde Schwab, created an organization to recognize social entrepreneurs around the world, and largely to bring them into World Economic Forum events, because they recognize government and big business were there, but civil society wasn't represented. And so they look around the world. They've got I think they've selected over the last 25 years about 400 social entrepreneurs. And we got that award in 2016. And it, first of all, you go like, us? Who? Us? Like, on the tip of Africa? Like, But I think what has helped us do is we've really been we've been very fortunate to travel the world. I'm off to South Korea with the World Economic Forum next month. It's incredible to see what's out in the world, but also to recognize that what we're doing in South Africa and with many incredible social entrepreneurs in South Africa is world class. Because we have so many problems, we've got incredible people coming up with incredible solutions, and we can be very, very proud of that. So yeah, that I think that is sort of really, yeah, it's been a great accolade, but also a great opportunity to learn from others and to step into, you know, our that we're not just on the tip of Africa. You know, we're actually at the forefront, and I think that's great to be recognized like that.
I'm going to change the view back to gallery, just so that all the women on the screen, and there are a few men as well, get to just engage, and we'll get to answer some questions in a minute. But I know as you have turned 15 and are celebrating 15 years of TCB, that over the last 2 weeks you have written 10 lessons that you have learned over the 15 years. And I will, in the notes that I send to you together with the recording to everyone, I will give you a link to Tracey's LinkedIn profile so that you can read the depth behind every lesson, because I think it's a lesson and a book that needs to be written, Tracey. So yeah, you better find someone who can help you to do this sooner rather than later. So do you want to maybe just share one or two of those, and then we'll open it up? And I know people have been encouraged, but they've got questions, and I want to make sure we leave enough time for some of those questions as well.
Yeah, I think I'm going to share the first one and the last one, and then maybe one in between. I think the first one, the lesson there was about naive optimism, and it's like, what makes us start something? And I've been reflecting on that because as I get older, I'm now 55, turning 56, lots of opportunities come my way, and I'm saying no to more than I used to. And why is that? And I think, you know, to get started in anything new, you have to have this naive optimism. You have to believe you can change, you can do something, whatever it is, and you actually have to be naive about it. In other words, the more you knew about it, how hard the journey was going to be, because anything that you do is going to be hard when you knew it. If you thought about all the hard stuff and you actually knew too much, you'd never do it. I think it's, you know, a lot of people talk about parenting. If you knew how hard parenting was going to be and you didn't just trust that sort of maternal instinct that you should have children, you'd never have children. If you did the maths on how much that cost you, you'd never have children. It's a really bad investment. So the less you know, the better, actually. And that when you lose that naive optimism, you lose the will to act. So for me, that was that, like, we need to like keep the optimism going and sometimes just act. Always say, act with your heart, think with your head later, it'll come. So that was the one. And then the last lesson was really about legacy. You know, as I'm getting older, I'm asking. I recently went to the funeral of a family friend, my parents' family friend, and we kind of, you know, the wife is my godmother. And what struck me at this funeral is just the very special memories that somebody spoke about this individual. What a great grandfather he was, what a great dad he was, how much fun he was. And I think, you know, I think we mustn't get hung up on legacy as the things you leave behind. You know, even where the organization that, you know, we built survives, doesn't really matter. It's actually about the lives that were impacted by your stay on the earth. You know, like, did you impact people's lives? Whether, and so often, in the funding space, you worry about funding. Is there going to be funding? That's what keeps me up at night. But I'm getting more settled about it. Doesn't matter. It's really about the lives that are impacted along the way, and those lives hopefully will be forever changed. So it's whether you've impacted somebody as a mother, as a sister, as a grandmother, as a great manager. And yeah, so I think that for me is, when you're asking yourself, what should I show up to do today? It's really about, did I have a positive impact on the world? That is really what true fulfillment is. Not necessarily about the stuff and the things you built. It's about the people you interacted with.
Thanks, Tracey.
I think in the middle, in terms of lessons, really a lesson around collaboration. One thing that I've learned is to be generous with information, generous with sharing, and that actually the more you give, the more you get. And we open sourced a lot of the things that we've developed, and let me demystify a myth about the nonprofit sector. It's a highly competitive sector. It's a highly competitive sector, and you're all competing for money, for funding, for recognition, all sorts of things. And the instinct is to hold on to your unique value proposition. That's your instinct. But actually, once we gave things away, the sum of the parts became bigger. And I essentially learned that lesson from Woolworths, because when we went to approach Simon Susman, and I said, this is your project. You're going to do this. We're just going to be your intermediaries, and we're happy to put the brand on the door and sign a contract and everything. And he said, no, you need so much more than us, and we're not going to claim it. You need to go and bring in as many other retailers, and if we put our name on the door, others won't come because we will have excluded them. And I think I'm continuing to learn that lesson every single day, is that generosity brings many, many more benefits. But you can't give with that as the intent. Just give generously, and the rest will follow.
Great. Thank you, Tracey. That was amazing. If you have a question, either use the mechanical hand or just put up your hand, and I will come to you. Amanda, we'll start with you.
Good morning, and thank you so much, Tracey, and thank you, Linda, for organising. Tracey, I'm off a call this morning with Business Leadership South Africa, and they're working with Business Unity South Africa to help motivate the president, if that makes sense, in terms of all the things that are not going so well at the moment with South Africa. And we were talking all about these things that we often call them soft skills, but actually they materialize or they manifest as very, very hard and successful outcomes. Just the notion of being generous with what you have, it's important to bear in mind. So they've actually asked, could we put together a proposal for a pilot project, if that makes sense, how we can tackle this lack of care and purpose and focus, and fundamentally this notion of caring about what you do and the way you do it, because it's got just as much applicability to the public sector as it has to the not-for-profit and the business sector. And I think, Linda, this was the big thing that I said to them this morning. If it can work in public, it can work in private as well. So the fact that you've got that competitiveness, Tracey, I think in the not-for-profit sector, it sort of gives you that same motivation as we would see in business, but it's not there in public, if that makes sense. There's not that sort of impetus to get a purpose, get a passion, and actually be better at what you do. So I just wondered if you could just have a think about that, and in terms of how you would take your learnings and inspire a public sector pilot, if that makes sense, to do better and provide better service to a community.
Thanks, Amanda.
Mhm.
Do you want me to answer, or are we going to take it?
Go for it, Tracey.
Go for it.
You know, for me, it's all about purpose. So, you know, I often go back into boardrooms now. I get invited back into these retail boardrooms, all right? And I think many South Africans, including and I put myself in that box historically, are completely disconnected, especially corporates. Corporate South Africans are completely disconnected from the realities on the ground. They want a better South Africa, but they don't actually understand what is going on, because it's, once you know, it's very painful to turn a blind eye. And you know, I look back on my own career and I feel really guilty that I was a white South African driving from my, you know, southern suburbs lifestyle, driving into my corporate office, in my corner office, driving home. And the only real connection that I had to the realities of South Africa was through my nanny, who used to tell me horrific stories. And it's almost that lack of connection to the problem that is causing disconnect. And so I also think that we don't, I know this is being recorded, but I don't think we have a compelling vision for our country. We do not have something that says we want to be like this. We focus so much on our problems, but we don't have something that we're all working towards. We don't have, you know, what is this visual picture of this country we want? And we have to mobilize all of our citizens, every single person, whether it's business or communities, around this vision. Because, and I think Adrian Gore does a great job of this. I don't know if you've read Bruce Whitfield's book, his last book, One Thing. And he has a great chapter in that. He invited 100 people to write a chapter of one thing they would do if they were president for the day. And he got such a wide variety of ideas. But what Adrian Gore says is we have to change the narrative first. If you change the narrative in everybody's head, then everything just flows behind that. You become what you think you are, or you become what you want to be. I don't think we know what we want to become. So, and you can't you can't fix everything, like, but you have to figure out what, if we become this, it'll actually fix the others. You know what I mean? And I think if you look at great leaders, they had single narratives of things that they were going to become, and they became. So that would be my perspective on that. I don't know if that's practical now.
Thanks, Tracey.
I think you're spot on. You're spot on, and all those things came up. So we've suggested something
Amanda,
small.
I'm going to let one or two other people just
No
also
worries.
ask, otherwise we're going to be on the hour. But thank you. Anybody else?
Can I pick up? Sorry, can I just pick up? I mean, I
Julia.
think Tracy's absolutely right. But the people, and really, it's got to be our leadership of our government, because they are, you know, you've got head of business in different industries, but it's, you know what I mean? The vision needs to come from your leadership, and the leadership of this country is, you know, our president and his cabinet. You know what I mean? So, you know, I mean, it can start, and it's there. It can start in us individually, but you know what I mean? If you want it to have wide impact, like lots of things, you know, schools, whatever, it comes from the top. Sorry, it's not really, I mean, I'm just adding to the.
Thanks, Julia.
Yeah.
Pam.
I would beg to differ on that. I thank you, Tracey. I loved hearing your story, and I'm going to repeat it to your mother for what she doesn't know. I said to her this morning, Tracy speaking today, she never told me. But just going back to this idea of the vision, there is a national vision in the National Development Plan. However, that was developed from the top and it's never got down to the bottom. And I completely disagree, I'm sorry, with the previous speaker and agree with what Tracy says. It starts with each one of us. And it starts in communities, and we need to play that role of enabling communities and providing safe spaces and facilitating those discussions at community level. What do you want for your child, your family, your society to become? And in that way, you change lives. And there are a number of projects like that, working with parents and communities in deep rural and disadvantaged communities. There are just not enough of them, and not enough people realize how important it is. And it often starts with children. What do you want for your child? Because then people really do focus on the future that they want for their little people.
Thank you, Pam. Marina, I'm going to get to you. I'm going to go to Debs first.
Hi, Linda, and thank you very much for today. And Tracy, thank you for your very valuable insights into this 50 plus community that I've become part of. I'm semi-retired, but starting to try and find ways to I'm trying to understand how we harness the experiences that we have, the talent, the sort of like passion that we have inside us, that we can make a difference and keep our legacy going. How do we harness that? I've started doing a little bit of volunteer work with Achendio and the Sparks, Rowan, and I'm absolutely loving it. I'm learning about things, but my thing is, how do we measure our impact? How do we know that we're doing the right thing, that we're not sort of like going in and putting a Band-Aid on something that actually really needs something a lot more? It looks all nice on the Instagram pictures, but at the end of the day, are we actually doing more harm than good? How do we know that perhaps we're working in the ECD? I'm very passionate about education. I always have been. How do we know that what we're doing is not just airy fairy? I brought cakes to some kids at school, and at a poor school. Yay, I've done. Have I made an impact? How do we know? How do we measure? And how do we find where we should be? I don't want to be out there sort of wandering around for the next 20 years. Sort of, I've got all this information and all of this talent. What can I do with it? How can I find a way to actually make a difference? Thanks.
Debs, I'm going to, Tracy, before you reply, I'm just going to get the other two questions, and then you can summarize the three together, because I am mindful of the time and I don't want to go over the hour for you. So Monine, quickly, your question. Thanks, Debs.
Yeah, thanks. Quick question is, I'm always interested to understand the lessons that we can harness from people doing such a transition. So I would be interested, Tracy, if you can share one or two pointers around navigating the transition that you've made personally. That would really be an interesting insight if you wouldn't mind sharing. Thank you.
Thanks, Monine. And Lisa?
Thanks, Linda. The question I have, Tracy, you mentioned earlier that opportunities come your way and you're offered a lot of opportunities all the time that you just don't have capacity for. Could you elaborate on what those kind of opportunities are? I think many of us are looking for opportunities, and if we could, pick up on some of those that you can't get to, it might be collaborative and communal. Thanks.
Cool.
Right.
Okay.
So you can pull those three together, Tracy, in your inspiring last comment.
Okay. Right. So Debs, how do you know if you're helping or harming? All right. I'll give you a simple test for that. Did whatever you do give someone an I can moment, in that I can do this, I did this, not Debs did this, I did this for myself, And
Mm.
does it build more resilience? So the test that I have is when you get asked at the traffic lights for money, I want you to all think about how you can, if you give money, you're giving someone an I can't moment. You're giving someone an I can't moment. I can't, Debs can. Think creatively. What could you do with the person at the traffic light to give them an I can moment? If you're giving people I can moments, they're doing things for themselves and you're not doing things for them, you are only helping. And handouts are I can't moments, not I can moments. And we would call you in our business an I can stealer if you're giving handouts. So you're stealing someone's joy because when you get an I can moment, you get joy, you get serotonin, and that then drives you to want to try more things. Navigating transitions. I think you have to know in a transition that you're going to feel unsettled. You're going to feel unsettled. That's a guarantee. Accept it. You're going to go, should I go backwards? That's natural. Should I go backwards? Should I just go back to what is normal for me? And kind of sit with that unsettling. And I would say keep being inquisitive. See it as a process rather than a destination. You don't have to have the answer. It evolves. And you have to be inquisitive. You just have to keep exploring. Have that coffee with somebody just for the sake of it. And I think in a transition, share your enthusiasm, your optimism, rather than the negativity. When people meet with me and they're like all negative and life's going badly, I don't feel like really helping them. Those that are optimistic kind of it's that energy passes on. So that's what I would say to you in a transition. And just don't be too hard on yourself. Have compassion. Have compassion. And then Lisa, yeah, I think the hard part about expanding is one lesson I've learned when you're running a business is every time you give birth to a new initiative, even though people say, I'd love to help, you're giving birth. You are the primary parent. and and once you've given birth to something, it's yours for life. Employees come and go because it's not their children. And so I think my lack of naive optimism is I know what it takes to have children now, as in businesses, and that each one is a great responsibility. And as I get older, I almost don't want more responsibility because then I've got to find when I decide to leave, I've got to find somebody else to take care of this baby that I birthed. And that's the sort of hesitation. I think as you get later in life, you don't want as much responsibility. You want to have the joy of having impact, but not necessarily this responsibility of paying salaries. So yeah, I hope that helps why I'm hesitant.
Thanks so much, Tracey. So we have had a conversation with one of the best social entrepreneurs in the world. So we don't all have to try and measure up to what Tracey has done, but we all can do something. And as Pam said, we can start where we are in our community. And the thing I love about 50 plus and working or volunteering for longer, it's all the doing words, the facilitating, the counseling, the mentoring, the kind of just holding hands with others in their organizations or in your community can start the process. And in our Ikigai, where we talk about what are you passionate about and what does the world need, that's where you start. And I just want to say thank you, Tracey. It's been a real privilege. And I have loved this conversation. And I hope each of you have learned something that you can take into whatever it is in your next season. Thanks, everyone.
Great. Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Linda.